Okay, so moving right along. Jewish literacy as opposed to Jewish history means to know not just what day things happened, which is not so important, but to know what major things and trends happened in Jewish history in thought and in politics and in crises and resolution over the course of the time this Churban Beis Hamikdash. So, guys, you can come today out with a whole year's worth of material, more than the next year's Jewish history probably. We're going to start with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Does anybody know when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed?
In the first in Jerusalem.
Second one. Second one, no, when?
Oh, 110 years after Perm or something like that.
Okay, so
It was up for 70 years, wasn't it?
no, it was up for 420. 68's common era when the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Okay, second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed in 68. And how many years ago?
It was on Crash Course.
What?
It was on Crash Course.
Yeah, 1900 and some odd years ago, right? After Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Israel was still primarily, Jewish people were still primarily in Eretz Yisrael. And at that time was the time when the Mishnah began to be compiled. It began already before Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, but primarily after Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Most of the people then, sages, were located in a place called Yavne. Yavne was where the Sanhedrin moved after the destruction of Beis Hamikdash. Later on, the Sanhedrin moved up north. It moved to the area which they Tiberia, Tiberias. And that's where the Mishnah was finally finished around the year 200 by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was the one who finally edited the Mishnah. He didn't necessarily write it down. It was written down perhaps over the course of the next few years. At about 200, the Mishnah is finished. That's the end of the period of which sages? What are they called? What are the sages in the Mishnah called? Tanoim. The Tanakhama is the first appearance in the Mishnah. Okay? So the Tanoim.
Oh, and then there's the Nagoin.
Yeah, he comes a lot later. So the Tanoim.
I'm related to him.
Many people are. Many people are. So
My grandfather has his Bedford.
the Lagoon?
Yep.
Very impressive.
Silver, boring.
So the period of Tanoim ends
I never stuck my nose in it.
around the year 200. For the next 300 years, we have the period of the Amoraim. Does anybody know what an Amora is? Amoraim are the people who wrote the Gemara. There were two places where Gemara was written. One was in Eretz Yisrael, which was Talmud Yerushalmi, and the other was in Bavel, which is Talmud Bavli. Most sages then, the preponderance of sages, were in Bavel. Yes, the reason that is because the Romans, the Byzantine Romans, in the about year 300, they started heavily persecuting the Jews in Eretz Yisrael. As they started heavily persecuting the Jews in Eretz Yisrael, Talmud Yerushalmi was disrupted. It was never found in editing because the persecution was too great. People had to go in hiding. People were killed. So therefore, never fully edited. In Bavel, they were less oppressed, and in Bavel, in fact, they had their own autonomy. They had their own ruler, who was called in Bavel called the Reish Galusa, literally the head of exile. He actually had what? He actually had powers to kill people and put people to death and to do all sorts of things. He was the political head of the Jewish people in Bavel. So most of the Talmud, which sorry, he was like a king. He was like an autonomous Jewish king. So most of the Talmud was done in Bavel, and around the year 500, that's when Talmud Bavli was completed, more or less. The editors were named Ravina and Ravashi. A few people after them, but they were the primary editors. That's the Gemara, Talmud Bavli. The reason why the Gemara had to be finished and go on is because, as the of Jewish history, persecutions began in Bavel. And you know the Bavel there is next to Iran. In Iran, we had the Zoroastrians. You know what the Zoroastrians are? Zoroastrians were a god of good and a god of evil. And they also are ventured to fire. So they had...
Isn't that Fishbach?
So at that point, that was when they started lighting Hanukkah candles inside because the Zoroastrians were very upset if anybody else lit for public. So they... Sorry?
Is that Kwanzaa?
No, Kwanzaa's from Africa. But the point is that since the persecution became heavy in Bavel, so therefore, as a result of time, the period of Talmud Bavli came to an end. After the period of Talmud Bavli was over, nevertheless, even though...
How do you know all this by heart?
That's my job. Even though the period of Talmud Bavli was over, nevertheless, the primary location of Jewish scholarship remained in Bavel. There were two major yeshivas for the next 500 years where Torah was considered to be centered, which were called Surah and Pumbedisa. Now, Surah and Pumbedisa originally, for many hundreds of years, were in two different things called Surah and Pumbedisa. Eventually, what happened towards the end of this 500-year period is that everybody moved to Baghdad. And Surah and Pumbedisa, two yeshivas don't speak from each other. But they still were considered to be the primary yeshivas of the time. Now, immediately after the Gemara, Rabbi Sai, there was a period called the period of Rabbanan Tavuroy.
Right.
Rabbanan Tavuroy were the people who finished editing the Gemara. Some of their names appear in the Gemara. Now, gentlemen, listen.
Shut up.
One of the major controversies of contemporary Judaism, although you might not be aware of it, surround the question of whether a good job was done editing the Gemara or wasn't, and whether we can go back and peel back the layers of the editing and go back and find opinions which were ordered by the editors and re-examine them. Orthodox Jews, for the most part, believe that this is not appropriate. That when the Gemara was completed by the Amoraim and then Rabbanan Savaroi, that's the authoritative and definitive version of the Gemara. There are, however, the fringes of orthodoxy, people who believe that you can go back actually and peel back the layers, and in some very late yeshivas nowadays, they are according to that approach. It's called rivadim, which are layers in the Gemara. We don't treat the Gemara that way. We understand that the Gemara was edited by great people, and that they knew what they were doing, and therefore we assume that all it is authoritative. You can't go back and second guess what's from the editors, what's not from the editors.
Tomorrow with from the editors and not from the editors.
They try to do this. People try to figure out what's from the editors and what's original. So we don't learn that way.
I go to my Judaic store and buy a book.
No, as well. You buy a book based on that, but you probably wouldn't understand it. That's they're very complicated.
I understand Gemara.
Yeah, so it's a problem. Now, after Abbas Savaroi came the period of the Gaonim. The Gaonim, originally the Gaonim were the people who were heads of the yeshivas of Sur Batisa. The word Gaon, Rabbi Sai, means genius, but originally it comes from...
Gaon was the genius of...
No, but initially the word Gaon meant the pride. You know, like, Lou Gehrig was the pride of the Yankees, right? So the Gaon was the pride of Orthodox Judaism in Bavel. There were no Orthodox Jews.
He was a half leader.
Right. So Gaon also got to 60 because Gaon was expected to know all 60 Masechtas of Shas. So then eventually the period became known as the Gaon. And even the people who are not heads of the yeshivas, not yet. Even the people who are not heads of the yeshivas were also called Gaonim by association. But because the whole period between about 500 and 1,000, it's called the period of the Gaonim. At that time, one of the greatest Gaonim of all was Rav Gaon. Rav Gaon lived in the 900s. Rav Gaon was faced with the first major split in Judaism. Okay, until then everybody was Jewish and Orthodox, so to speak. But Rav Gaon
was like any other things after that?
right.
Came around and screwed everything up.
900 with time Rav Gaon. Then there came up the movement called the Karaites.
So it was just
No, he battled them. He didn't start them. The Karaites was by a fellow named Anan. Anan was put into prison by the Persian Empire, which was then, after the rise of Islam, then became in the year 650 or so. All the Mideast became Muslim. So the Persians, because the Jews said he's not authentically Jewish. He was doing all sorts of nasty things. Now, when he was in jail, there was a fellow prisoner who told him, they're going to put you to death. So he said, well, so what should I do? So he said, this is what you should do. You should claim you're not Jewish, you have your own religion. And if you have your own religion, then you can't be put to death for rebelling against the Jewish religion. So another came and said to the government, I have a religion. It's called Karaism. And they accepted that, and he lived happily ever after. So they didn't let him go. So Karaism comes from the word Kara, which comes from the word Mikra. Mikra means scripture. And Karaites only believe in Torah B'Ksav. They don't believe in Torah Sheba'al Peh. They believe that you give any interpretation you want to Torah, you're not bound by the interpretation which Chazal gave. So for example, Karaites do not wear tefillin. To do it much earlier, they were already sick by now.
No, but aren't...
It's similar idea. The Karaites were much more radical. They didn't wear tefillin. The reason they wear tefillin is because they says that they should be on your arm and on your head. It's symbolic. They should always have Torah in mind, in your head, and always exercise with your arm. It's pretty cool. If you don't have any Torah path, you can basically make everything up as you go along. Another thing Karaites are supposed to be famous for is that they don't go to shul on Shabbos. Because on Shabbos, they take literally, a person's not allowed to leave their place on Shabbos. Which
Is allowed to watch TV and everything?
they accept the Rabbanon, so clearly they have a Good question. No, but that's not good enough reason to join them. So the
Wait, where are these people?
Karaites.
No, you're still
Can
not
I
join them?
If you go to Karat-corner.org, and you can find out about them and their activities.
What is it?
I think it's Kara
Their
with K.
main
No.
is that they just don't
Yeah.
follow their...
They don't have anything, any Rabbanon doesn't exist.
Why not?
Wait, how do you spell it?
K-A-R-A-I-T.
K-I-T.
Does that mean when
T.
it says does that mean when it says you can't
eat meat and look at its mother when we can't have meat and milk.
Well, see, the thing is like this, the beauty of the Karaite religion, that you can basically make stuff up as you go along. So in theory, they can say yes, it only means the mother's milk. If they want it, they will say like the rabbis, it means every milk.
Aren't they very literal though? It seems like
Yes,
they aren't.
but literal, the Torah is almost impossible to understand literally.
It's that.
K-A-
I know I got that. Is that a line or
A dash. I think that's what it used to be. Alright,
Is that an A?
Wait,
Oh,
there's still-
K-A-R-A-I-T-E-porno.org, otherwise try Karaites.org.
Are they still like a thriving?
No, they're not trying to.
They have their own website.
Anybody can have their own website.
I found it.
Well, try Karaites.org.
Wait, Rob, I have a question.
Yes.
So before the Karaites came, there was no other school up.
No, not since the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. In other words, there are people who left Judaism, but no, there was no other school flows in Judaism.
No, this is the Jewish thing.
Why not? No one
Word
further
of
ever like
What?
questioning this or that.
Karite Jews of America.
Karaite Jews in America found it? Okay. That's Karaites.org?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Donnie, what?
So no one ever thought of questioning
Learning.
anything that they thought.
Right. That's an important point, which is that though, even the Karaites also accepted Torah Shebeksav as being God's revealed word from Sinai.
Karite Judaism.
Okay?
Meaning what?
As being God's revealed word from Sinai. Nobody questioned that until much later history.
It doesn't seem that crazy to take the Torah so literally.
Well, it does, because the Torah, it is crazy, because first of all, you come up with things like an R for an I for it to be literal, which is very difficult to understand.
California.
Also, you come up with things like you come up with things that, sukkah. It says in Torah to sit in a sukkah, but you have no clue from Torah to tell what a sukkah is. So therefore, how do you, without Torah Shapeh, how do you know how to make a sukkah? Right, so they have to make it up as you go along. The Torah, it says Torah
But how
Shebeksav
do we know
is
the
script.
people who wrote Torah Shebeksav or who did
God.
yeah, whatever they asked, how do we know those are the right things and that the Karaites are not?
Because God said to the rabbis, they will tell you what to do. I'm going to send you the prophets, I'm going to send you rabbis, and they're going to keep alive the tradition which I gave them, the verb oral tradition.
Yeah, but there's false Rebbe and not Rebbe.
Yes, but there was no, we know from Tanakh that when the false prophets, they were identified usually.
Wasn't this rabbi pretend to be like the Messiah?
We're getting it, he's much later. We're going to come to him, okay? So the,
Yeah, but wait, they can go both ways with this argument. Because there's plenty of times that Prophet Rebbe have messed up.
when they messed up, Tanakh tells us that. No, it's one of the great things about Judaism. Listen, Donnie, listen. One of the great things about Judaism is beginning with Chumash. The Torah, the Nevi'im, Ksubim, Chazal, they always tell us about the mess ups, the sins, the weaknesses, and the shortcomings of our great people. No other religion does that. If you go to Islam and say bad things about Muhammad, you get killed. You
If you don't go to Islam, you don't say bad things about Muhammad, they might do you.
That's true. You go to Christianity, nowadays they don't care that much, but used to be they would say bad things about Jesus, they'd kill you too. They suppress any negative thing about their
Also,
leaders.
Karite religion.
Really? Not yet.
You do, like, you have a question, you just look in the Bible and it doesn't say, you do whatever you want.
That's awesome!
I said that's where the character. Didn't I say that?
It's like yourself, it goes like, yeah, Orthodox Jews believe in rabbis, but we also believe in rabbis, but you can't find, if you, but like also to use our heads ourselves, so if you look in the Bible, you can't find it, you just do whatever you want.
Right.
See,
Yeah.
isn't that up here where they
That-
go
what?
sometimes?
Sorry?
Isn't that
I'm from
sometimes?
Karite.
I would say Donnie. I would say Donnie's
Rabbis
answer.
from Karite, Egypt.
No, they're not from Karite.
I don't know, that's what the dude said.
Cairo, you mean?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
But I don't think that's not true. That's not where the name comes from. Yes, Donnie.
Doesn't it seem like some Rebbe do kind of like
About prayer.
make stuff up from nowhere? Just like they see this line of Torah, then all of a sudden come up with something.
So that comes up, and you have to question it when you see it.
Right, but just like the Sukkah thing, how do you know that they're in those type of countries?
But that's what Rambam says. Rambam says we see that Sukkot. We have a tradition of Sukkot. This was made last year, the year before. The chain of tradition goes back in broken chain to Sinai.
Yeah, but there's so many other ways of doing this mitzvah.
But not there are. Sukkah is only one way to do the mitzvah of Sukkah.
Or
The
lulav also, like-
lulav is only one way. The machlok is about the details, but basically it's one way to do it. Same thing with tefillin. It doesn't say how to make the tefillin. You have to have a chain of tradition. Judaism lives on its tradition. Without tradition, all of Judaism falls apart.
Yeah, but the way you would daven is different. The way that.
That is only the Rabbanan. What about teaching the rice?
So,
You got it?
yeah.
Okay, so now the Karaites and was the first major split off. That they are still, as Hillel found, they're still Karaites today. They're very small, not significant. But
We're in California.
What else
Yes.
is new?
they're also in Yerushalayim. There's actually Karaite shul in the Jewish quarter of the old city. So moving on in history. So now about the year 1000. About 1000, so we start the period of the Rishonim. Yosef, the Rishonim. Okay, Rishonim are about 1000 are the Rishonim. Now there's this beautiful legend, which is probably not true, about the four captives. That there were four great rabbis who were raising funds for the yeshivas in Bavel, for Surah Badisa, whatever, and they were taken captive by pirates when they were sailing the Mediterranean, and they were dispersed. They were being redeemed in various different Jewish communities in North Africa, in Italy, and in Spain. And that's how they say the period of Rishonim got started, because these great rabbis ended up in all other corners of the earth, and they brought centers of Torah with them where they went. So it's a true story. It's probably not true, but it's the story of the four captives, it's called. But in any event, what did happen, and we know is true, is that people started moving away from Bavel, and they started dispersing all over the world. And they started, new centers of Torah rose in North Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, in Spain, in Italy, and later on in France and Germany, as migrations took place over time. The main focus gradually, yes.
Couldn't we say that that's one of the main crumbling points of Jewish history? That
Main what?
Spread out? The main crumbling points.
No, actually, it's the fact that Jews spread out all over the world is a good thing, not a bad thing.
But isn't it bad today that we can't get everyone into Israel?
Today, but for most of Jewish history, it wasn't feasible anyway. So therefore, they had to be all over, because one place got decimated for some reason. They could rebuild elsewhere. So that was, being scattered was not such a bad thing. Like what? Yeah, but like let's say in 1492 when they were kicked out of Spain, so they were sent in France and Germany already, and so on and so forth. Now, Rabbi said the period of Rishonim,
People get kicked out of Spain and all that stuff, or no?
the kind of people never made it to Spain. They were mostly in Bavel, and then they moved to Fort California. There were a lot of them in Crimea. Crimea is one of the areas of Russia. For some reason they congregated there. Yeah, it's Bukhara further west. So the period of the Rishonim, the first of the major Rishonim was Rabbeinu Hananel. He's actually on the side of the Gemara in many places. He lived in Italy. Okay, so Rabbeinu Hananel was the first major Rishon. Then we have the next major Rishon is Rabbeinu Gershom. Guys, what is Rabbeinu Gershom famous for?
I've never heard of this man.
Rabbeinu Gershom called the Me'or HaGola, the light of the exile. He lived in France. He's the one who forbade men to marry to more than one wife at a time. There was Rabbeinu Gershom Sakana. It's called Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershom. Because Cherem means that if you do it, you excommunicate from the Jewish community. Now, Ashkenazim, all of European Greek, accepted Rabbeinu Gershom. And that's why they are stuck not being allowed to marry more than one wife. Avihu, were you awake, will be able to tell us that. Yeah, we're able to tell us that the Sephardi Jews did not accept Rabbeinu Gershom. And therefore, until as recently as the late 20th century, you have Sephardim which who have multiple wives, particularly the Yemenites, because they never accepted Rabbeinu Gershom.
Wait, doesn't the Torah say that?
Yes, but Rabbeinu Gershom made a cherem, which is an enactment, which is a rare thing after the Gemara was completed. But he made an enactment that Jews are not allowed to have more than one wife.
Can't we not go against what the Torah says?
We can add on to what the Torah says.
Yeah, but it says you
thought you can't add on to
rabbis said you can't do that. It says you could.
That's what rabbis, and that's what the rabbis can do. They do all the
It
time.
doesn't say you could, it just doesn't say you can.
Yes, it's not a mitzvah to have more than one wife.
Yeah, but that's a loophole.
What?
That's not a loophole. It's like actually a loophole.
Right, they're closing off a loophole. Yeah, they're closing off a thing which is a leniency
So
before.
why would it be in the Torah if it's just
The Torah was meant to be flexible. It was not meant to be rigid. Yeah, it is. Sure. Honestly. Yes. As a matter of fact, were we to have Sanhedrin today, we can make massive changes in the entire Jew religion. Unfortunately, we don't have a Sanhedrin.
But how nowadays we can't
What?
can nowadays change it to new types of technologies, I guess.
Like what?
I mean, how come we can't conform it? Not only conform it in crazy ways, but conform it.
Fix the whole double days of Yom Tov in Israel.
You know why?
Outside of
I said because in order to fulfill God's Sanhedrin, all Jews have to get together and agree on who the sages could be. In order to do that, we have to get rid of the reason why the base of Mikdash was destroyed. You know why it's basically destroyed? That you know. Second base of Mikdash. Why was it destroyed? Sinas Chinam, because Jews hate each other's guts. Right. So therefore, Jews don't get along, and there is no reason for it.
That's because a lot of the Jews are a bunch of a-holes, that's why.
That's
called Sinas Chinam.
yes, that's called Sinas Chinam. Yes. So hatred for no good reason. So there. Oh yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, because you extrapolate from the ones you don't like.
Reason.
Yeah, for a few of them.
Yeah, okay, fine, so I hate their guts.
Okay, so that's 5. Not more than that. What about the other 15 million? By guilt by association?
I couldn't really care less what happens to them.
I know. So the
Hate, that means like, there's no love.
apathy, right? It's worse. So
What?
apathy is worse.
No, it's not.
Not caring is the worst malady of all.
Apathy is the worst thing in our life.
Is
Yes,
that why hell is my first? Where's hell? Oh, he's not here.
that's why we have what we have. The beauty of
Move
Yes.
your laptop so I can see.
I don't want anybody to see this.
Why?
Because I want to pretend that we have a very
You
attentive,
can already hear it.
attentive group. So so Rabbeinu Gershom, another kind of Rabbeinu Gershom enactment that he made, which actually is kept, everybody, even the Sfarim, because this one they decided to keep, is you're not allowed to open other people's mail. Okay, until then, it was technically there was no prohibition to read other people's letters.
Illegal.
There was no prohibition; it wasn't legal back then. It wasn't legal back in the 1000s. So till then there was no such thing necessarily as privacy in Jewish law or intellectual property. Rabbi Gershom was the one who came up with the idea of intellectual property, meaning that when I write a letter, it's mine, secret. It's not for you unless I give you permission to see it.
That's Jewish also.
From the 1000s, that's when it begins. Yes. Okay.
Can you say 1,000, not 1000?
1,000. Okay, when Rabbeinu Gershom,
Actually, 1000.
Rabbeinu, towards the end of that century, the 1065, we have Rashi. Now Rashi, of course, is the major commentator on Tanakh, on Gemara. Rashi made a revolution in learning. Because simply put, until Rashi, there was no Rashi. So therefore, learning was not as accessible in any way, shape, or form as it was after Rashi came along. Sorry, they were, but they were not. Well,
They weren't printed in every bar.
they weren't widespread. They weren't well known, and mostly people had own personal notebooks with these commentaries, but they weren't widespread. For example, Rabbi Gershom wrote commentaries after us, Rabbi Chanel, but they were all manuscript form. They weren't widespread in the 19th century when people actually published manuscripts.
Any of Russian stuff that he take from them?
Yes, and he said he takes from them. Yes, yeah, because he had those records. But so at the same time, more or less, a few years later, you have first in Spain and then North Africa, the great Rambam. Now the Rambam again is in the early 1100s. The Rambam was a Talmud of Rabbi Yitzchak, of Yitzchak Alfasi. In the back of the Gemaras,
All sick wine.
the Rif of Yitzchak Alfasi. In the back of the Gemara, you have his. It looks like if you look at the Gemara in the back, there's something which looks like the Gemara over again. If I say, look here, back here in the back of the Gemara. This looks like the Gemara over again in the back of the Gemara, but this actually in the middle of the page is the Rif. The Rif is the Rishon Yitzchak Alfasi. He wrote a schematic. What?
Not like a guitar riff, no?
No, that's his version. That's his abbreviation. The Rif wrote the first synopsis of
Clever, funny.
the halachic part of the Gemaras. In other words, he took out the discussions and deliberations and just put in the halacha. So the Rambam, who was a student of his, was the first one on a major scale. There are other smaller, potentially four, but on a major scale, to write a code of Jewish law. Code of Jewish law means he took it out of the context of the Gemara. He made it its own book, its own work, Mishnah Torah. The code of Jewish law, being the Mishnah Torah, caused tremendous controversy at its time. Tremendous controversy because many of the old school Rishonim held that everybody who wants to issue a halachic ruling should have to go back to the Gemara and figure it out from scratch. You shouldn't have a code which comes along and says this is the authoritative way of looking at things. Shulchan Aruch is later on. You shouldn't have this authoritative way of looking at things.
Yeah, Shulchan Aruch is also.
That is true, but we'll get there. The thing should be each time you have an issue, you should go back to the Gemara itself. The Rambam obviously didn't hold the way. That's one of the reasons he wrote the Mishnah Torah. The other reason he wrote the Mishnah Torah is because he held that people could learn the Mishnah Torah after a certain amount of years. People just learn halacha from the Mishnah Torah. Yeah. What? Yeah, go ahead. That after the period of the Mishnah Torah, after the person was Talmud Chacham, all he had to do was learn Mishnah Torah for the rest of his life, and at the same time he became a big philosopher because the Rambam believed in philosophy. Rambam believed that Judaism and philosophy are not just compatible, but they work hand in hand. And therefore, in order to understand Judaism properly, you have to know Aristotle, you have to know Socrates, you have to know Plato, you have to know all the great philosophicals, and you have to function according to their principles. And so the Rambam brings down in Mishnah Torah Aristotle's golden mean means Aristotle's approach toward character development. It means, if you know Aristotle's golden mean, it means that everything which is done should be done in moderation. Not too much one way, not too much another way. He shows to something everything in moderation. So the Rambam has that in several places, among them in Mishnah Torah. And of course he brings source of that from Chazal. But the point that you can understand Chazal better, says the Rambam, if you understand philosophy, because those great branches of wisdom go together. The Rambam aroused a lot of opposition because he was into philosophy. We're being recorded.
Oh, I love you. Oh, sorry. Who's recording you?
I'm recording myself.
For what? For what?
Put it on YouTube. Give me a course you should do today.
Are you really?
Yeah.
You're awesome, by the way.
Okay.
You know so much Torah, I do.
Thank you. I have some words, right?
Quick.
The Rambam aroused tremendous opposition because many of the rabbis from other parts of the world felt that philosophy is foreign to Judaism, and they got most upset about his sefer called Nevuchim. The Nevuchim was the guy for the perplexed, was the Rambam's major work on philosophy and the correlation of philosophy to Torah. As a matter of fact, after the Rambam died, lived in the 1100s, in the 1200s there was a massive public burning of the Nevuchim, of the Rambam's writings, and Rabbeinu Yonah, who was one of the Rishonim who participated in that burning, later on felt very bad about it. There was a sefer called Shiur Tshuva. Shiur Tshuva was how to do tshuva because he had to do tshuva. And in 1242, we have in the Kinos record of the massive burning of Jewish manuscripts in Paris. 24 cartloads of Jewish manuscripts were burnt by the fellow who today is called St. Louis.
What?
Yes, the King of France. His name was Louis.
Joey,
Okay.
you know all the good stuff.
You're safe. Anyway,
He did this for you.
so I want you to know what 24 cartloads of manuscripts mean. That before the printing press was invented, there was no printing press, so therefore much of Jewish knowledge, much scholarship was lost forever because there was so few. Everything was manuscript. It was hard to reproduce, and some things are only in a single copy. So it was a massive horrific event. That's why it made it to the Kinos as one of the things which would be known. Now, so there was again the Rambam. There was opposition to the Rambam. What we say in Tisha B'Av. The opposition to Rambam. After the Rambam, the next major Rishon for our purposes is the Ramban. The Ramban lives in the 1200s in Spain. And those of you who saw the Disputation movie with me know that the Ramban had to battle the Christians.
He's not Churban, right?
No, he's still Rishonim.
Oh, he's the end of the Rishon.
No, he's not the end either. So the They start off in 100 and around 1400. So the Ramban was a major figure. He was, as opposed to the Rambam, who was more of a philosopher, the Ramban was more of a mystic. He was a Kabbalist. But they were both, interestingly enough, doctors. They both made their living for being doctors, and this established a long tradition of Jewish doctors in the world. So so the Ramban and Rambam were major Rishonim, along with Rashi, and Rashi's grandchildren. This is all in the 1100s, 1200s, when Rabbeinu Tam was one of Rashi's grandchildren, a bunch of other Bali Tosfos, some were related, some were not. But the first major persecution in Europe occurs in 1096. 1096 was the year of, anybody know?
Incursion.
General history.
Perm.
General history.
Spanish Inquisition.
No. Very good. First Crusade. 1096 First Crusade. The Crusade swept over Europe and decimated French and German Jewry, because even though their main mitzvah was get their Eretz Yisrael and conquer it from the infidel Muslims, nevertheless they decimated Jewish communities because they liked Jewish money. Everybody does. So that was a lot of Rishonim were killed at that time, and that was the beginning of the decline of the period of Rishonim in France and Germany. Okay, the Crusade. Yeah, he's sleeping in the back.
Spectre, let's go. We gotta sing Happy Birthday. Come on. You got a chance to birthday.
I'm not saying sure. So the Crusades, beginning of the end for French and Jewry, especially because besides that, they were kicked out of France and Germany several times. They kicked out of areas of France and Germany, and out of France and Germany altogether, and as well in the 90 out of England. So Jews were kicked out from place to place in Northern Europe, and the period of Rishonim in Northern Europe ends around the 1300s, more or less in the 1300s. It went on later in Spain, because in Spain the Jews still flourished to a much greater extent. There was persecutions began in Spain in the late 1300s. And persecutions began in Spain also, then things started going downhill there as well. But the last person who could be considered, for argument's sake, a Rishon is Abarbanel. The Abarbanel was one of the people who was kicked out of Spain in 1492. They actually wanted him to stay because he was the treasurer. Sorry? What? Right, that's why they said Jesus was really Jewish.
Yeah, I learned this
1492. Actually, as you know, after 1492, the Spanish Jewry was dispersed all over the world, and many of them went to North Africa, some of them went to Turkey, some of them ended up in Poland. So the Jews who left in Spain had to live under the radar, and they became what are called Marranos.
Pigs.
Okay, pigs, right? Because they would not eat pigs. So that's them. and the Inquisition was made not in order to kill Jews. If you actually went to Spain as a Jew on business, you would be able to get, you would probably not be persecuted.
What's the password?
I'm not telling you, Jay.
No guarantee. It's on connected to the internet anyway. There's no guarantee, but
Really, Rabbi, did you really disconnect it?
yes, I'll come to my computer.
That's such a logo.
It was not it wasn't a crime to be Jewish. It was a crime, although Jews are not allowed to live in Spain.
It was a front
It
practice.
was a crime to be secretly Jewish, and that's what the Inquisition really was out to get. But at that point, also the Jews moved they moved north into places like Holland, where they became flourishing merchants. Jews made lots of money, and that's all good for the Jews, or better depending on the circumstances. But in any event, around the year 1490 to the late 1400s, the period of the Rishonim definitely comes to a close, without any doubt. Now, one of the great accomplishments of the 1500s was the putting together of the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch was put together around the year 1550 by, who's the author of Shulchan Aruch? Maran Rabbi Yosef, right. Rabbi Yosef Karo, and there is the Ashkenazic addition to that, which is written by Moshe Israel, is the Ramah. Now, the Shulchan Aruch was based on earlier work, the Torah, which was written about 200 years earlier, and that the Torah's format. But the Shulchan Aruch became a universally accepted code of Jewish law by everybody. The Rambam never achieved that degree of success. The Rambam thought he would, but he didn't. The Shulchan Aruch became universally accepted. In fact, that's what defines now Orthodox Judaism, somebody who accepts the Shulchan Aruch as binding. Now, of course, the Shulchan Aruch itself has many different opinions between the Mechaber, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, the base Yisrael, and the Ramah Moshe Israel. But to take with their commentaries, they represent the binding halacha for Judaism from that time onwards. So that was what happened in the mid 1500s. Rabbi Yisrael actually was I don't think he himself was kicked out of Spain, but I think his parents were. His parents were kicked out, went to Turkey, and he eventually ended up in Sfas. And in Sfas at the time, we have also the major development of the Shulchan Aruch, but also the Ari. The Ari stands for the Rabbi Yitzchak, was the major source for all subsequent generations of Kabbalah. Till the Ari, Kabbalah was usually, but the Ramban didn't go out and disseminate it. In other words, if you read the Ramban, you see Kabbalistic passages. But from the Ari and his Talmud, they brought Kabbalah out into the world as a dominant thought, a dominant strain of thought, and a dominant way of serving Hashem. Until then, people Kabbalists kept it to themselves. They didn't actually tell people that they were Kabbalists. They usually parts of secret societies practiced Kabbalah and learned Kabbalah. But the Arizal brought it out into the open, and from the time of the Ari, all Kabbalah is based on the Ari, and the Ari's major theory is that it is based on Tzimtzum. It's an important concept to remember. Tzimtzum literally means restriction. It means that Hashem, even though Hashem theoretically, although we've said several times, this is heretical, Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is true everywhere. Obviously, that's heresy because Hashem is nowhere. But it means that, till Hashem exists in a way which transcends all of the physical world which He created. But He created a material world in which He is concealed. His presence, so to speak, is restricted. And the mission of the Jewish people, humanity in general, but specifically the Jews, is to bring Hashem's presence into that vacant space. Of course, it's to a certain sense illusion, because since Hashem transcends time and space, so therefore there's nothing where He isn't, so to speak, present. But that way Hashem made the world is it looks like there's a vacant space where Hashem is not. And we're supposed to bring Hashem into that area. So that the Sfas was the hotbed of Jewish learning in the 1500s. But because both the Shulchan Aruch, the Rebbetzim Karo, and the Ari were there, the other focus center was in Poland, where the Ramah, and other great Achronim. These are now, we're definitely into the period of the Achronim, the early Achronim. It's kind of intuitive and it's blurry at the edges, but usually the expulsion from Spain is taken as the definitive end of the period of the Rishonim in the countries which was Sephardi, or Yidot and Mizrach, and that earlier, so after exactly when, about 100 years earlier, in the Ashkenazi countries where the persecution was far worse.
I don't know why they have to be named different.
Because it was applied so intuitively, just like intuitively Amoraim arguing on Tanoim. There's no great meeting which everybody decided, okay, from now we're not arguing on Tanoim anymore. Or after the Gemara, we're not arguing on Amoraim anymore. And there was no meeting which decided we're not arguing on Rishonim anymore. But there was some intuition which went through Am Yisrael. at the time of the expulsion from Spain, an epoch is over. This is a new epoch. We have to change things. The other great thing which happened in the 1490s, a little bit earlier, 1480s, was no general history.
Wait, say it again?
1480s.
Spanish Inquisition.
No, it was
Say it
1490s.
again? What year?
1480s, 1470s.
Oh, it went backwards.
I know, but not by much.
Where'd that?
The invention of
Oh, the time machine. Printing press.
printing press. The invention of printing press was the beginning of the end. Okay? Because of the invention of printing press, people actually had to memorize things. Once the printing press was made, so people no longer had to memorize things. What?
I'm taking recess, ready?
Yeah, we'll take recess. I'm going to take a break for recess.